I knew something was wrong the moment the conference room door closed, and the boss walked in with that self-satisfied smirk, the kind of smile people wear when they think they've already won. I had spent 5 years in that company. 5 years of early mornings, late nights, skipped lunches, canceled weekends, and birthdays spent answering emails instead of blowing out candles. I didn't complain. I believed in hard work, in earning your place, in building your reputation one result at a time. And everyone knew I was next in line for the promotion. Everyone. So when he cleared his throat and said, "We have some exciting news," my heart actually lifted for a second. I was ready. I had earned this. Then he said the words that made the room go cold. "My daughter, Sabrina, will be stepping into the new senior operations lead position." The room froze, a silence so thick it felt like gravity itself had doubled. Sabrina, who had been here for 11 months. Sabrina, who still had to ask how to print double-sided. Sabrina, who messed up the quarterly reports so badly we had to work an entire weekend fixing them while she went to a beach party. And he chose her. My boss didn't look at me during the announcement. Not once. He knew exactly what he was doing. He avoided my eyes like I was the sun and he was scared to burn. And everyone else? They stared at me because they knew what I had done for this company. I didn't say anything. I just nodded once, stood up, and walked out of that room before anyone could see the heat rising behind my eyes. That night, I sat in my small apartment, staring at the glow of the city from my window. 5 years. 5 years of loyalty. 5 years of giving them everything and leaving nothing for myself. And for what? So a girl who still spelled clientele with a K in emails could slide into a position I bled for? No, that was the night something hardened inside me. I realized that loyalty means nothing to people who only serve themselves. I realized that effort doesn't always bring reward. But I also realized something they didn't know yet. I had options, connections, skills they depended on. And most of all, I had patience. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office. Not angry, not shaking, just calm, the kind of calm that makes people nervous. He looked surprised to see me. "Oh, hey, I was going to talk to you," he said, but I cut him off. I placed my resignation letter on his desk and said, "No need. I'm done here." His eyes widened in panic. He tried to damage control, saying things like, "You're valued here, and we can discuss your future path." I smiled, a small, controlled smile, and said, "My future isn't here." Then I walked out, no dramatic exit, no yelling, no scene. Just silence. The kind of silence that echoes. What I didn't tell him was that the company's biggest client had been working directly with me for the past 3 years. I had built that relationship from scratch. Late-night calls, in-person meetings, negotiating deals that saved them millions, that was my work. And that client had already told me that if I ever left the company, they wanted to follow me wherever I went. So I started fresh. I joined a competitor, a smaller firm, more flexible and hungry for growth. They didn't just hire me, they welcomed me. They gave me creative control, leadership, and the freedom to actually build something real. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. 2 months later, my old boss called me. He sounded stressed, exhausted, desperate. He asked if I could help talk to the client, who had just pulled out of their contract with the company. The same client I had secured. The same client who was now working with me. I let him finish his entire frantic explanation. Then I said, slowly, clearly, they left because they wanted someone competent leading the project. There was silence. A long one. He understood. What followed was a chain reaction. Without that major account, their revenue projections plummeted. Investors backed out. Departments got cut. And yes, Sabrina was laid off. No safety net. No special treatment. The real world doesn't care whose daughter you are. Weeks later, I walked past the old building on my way to lunch. I saw my old coworkers leaving early, carrying boxes, eyes tired. One of them recognized me and called out, "You really turned the tables, huh?" I just shrugged and said, "I didn't turn anything. I just stopped holding it up." Because that's the truth. Sometimes revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes revenge is walking away and letting people feel the weight of everything you used to carry for them. I didn't realize how much of the company I had carried until it collapsed without me. You don't notice how heavy something is until you finally put it down. And once you do, you don't ever pick it back up again. About 3 months after the layoffs, I ran into Sabrina by accident at a small cafe near downtown. She didn't see me at first. She was sitting alone, staring at her phone, hands trembling a little. Her makeup was smudged, not dramatic or glamorous like before, just human. When she finally looked up, her eyes landed on me and something flickered across her face. Recognition, embarrassment, and something like regret. She walked over to me, slow, careful, like she was approaching someone who might push her away. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I nodded, not because I owed her anything, but because I was curious. She sat down across from me, wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to stay warm. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I mean, I knew my dad was favoring me, but I didn't realize everything you did. I just thought that's how things worked. You get opportunities if you're in the right family." I didn't rush to respond. I let her sit in the weight of her own words. Eventually, I said, "That's the problem. You were taught to skip the part where you earn it." Her eyes shimmered, not dramatic sobbing, just the quiet, painful sting of truth. She swallowed. "I've been applying everywhere. No one takes me seriously. They think I'm just some spoiled nepotism case." I didn't deny it, because that's what she had been, and she knew it now. After a moment, she asked, "How did you become this? Someone people actually trust?" I leaned back in my chair and looked her straight in the eye. "By doing the work when nobody was watching. Not to impress, not for applause, not for a title, but because that is what builds you." She nodded slowly, like someone learning how to walk again. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, not as rivals and not as enemies, but simply as two people who had finally stepped outside the shadows of someone else's expectations. When she stood up to leave, she said, "Thank you for not gloating." I didn't smile to be kind. I smiled because it was true. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had outgrown that world. Now, my days are filled with work that matters. I mentor interns who remind me of my younger self, the ones overlooked, the ones underestimated, the ones who are building their futures one skill, one effort, one day at a time. I spend evenings with friends instead of spreadsheets. I sleep with peace instead of resentment. People think the win was taking the client and watching the old company fall apart. But the real victory was this: I built a life they never could have given me, because they didn't understand the kind of person I was. The kind of person who earns everything. The kind of person who doesn't need shortcuts. The kind of person who walks away and rises. And if there is one message in all of this, it is simple. Never let someone convince you that your value is negotiable. Good work does not go unnoticed by the world, just by the wrong people. And when you finally find the ones who see you, you don't have to fight for your place anymore. You simply belong. Months later, I received an invitation to speak at a regional business leadership conference. Not because of titles, not because of status, but because word had spread about the work I was doing, mentoring rising talent and rebuilding teams based on integrity instead of ego. I accepted, not out of pride, but because I knew what it felt like to work hard in silence and wonder if anyone saw it. If my story could reach even one person stuck where I had been, it was worth it. When I walked on stage, the room was full: young professionals, managers, small business owners, people who were still learning how to fight for their place. I didn't give them some flashy motivational speech. I told them the truth. No one owes you recognition. No one owes you opportunity. But no one can take away who you become while you earn it. I told them about the late nights, the invisible work, the disappointment, the betrayal. And I told them about the shift. The moment I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't see it. The moment I stopped giving my loyalty to people who only valued themselves. The moment I chose to walk away. When the talk ended, people lined up just to shake my hand, to tell me their own stories of being overlooked, replaced, passed over. And I realized how many of us are living the same struggle, climbing the wrong ladders, in buildings that were never built to see us. That night, I went home and sat on my balcony, city lights flickering below, The air was cool. The world felt quiet. And I thought about how everything had unfolded, how what I once believed was humiliation became my turning point, how what felt like betrayal was actually the door opening to something better. See, people think revenge is making others suffer. But I've learned something else. The most powerful revenge is refusing to let someone else define your worth. My former boss still runs what's left of the company. Smaller, quieter, surviving but no longer thriving. Sometimes people tell me about new layoffs, new financial struggles, new cracks in the foundation. I don't feel satisfaction hearing it. I don't feel bitterness either. What I feel is distance. I left that world behind. Sabrina found work in a smaller firm too, entry level this time. And from what I've heard, she is putting in the work now. Learning, earning, becoming someone she was never given the chance to be while everything was handed to her. And I genuinely hope she succeeds, because the point was never for her to fail. The point was for me to grow, and I did. So now I close my laptop at 5. I take weekends off. I have dinner with people who care about me. I build a life that feels like mine. Not borrowed, not begged, not handed, earned. And there is a peace in that, the kind of peace no promotion could have ever given me. A few days after the conference, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone I hadn't heard from in a long time, Marcus, one of my closest coworkers from the old company. He wasn't just a colleague. He was one of the few who worked as hard as I did, who saw everything, who never said it out loud but understood the unfairness in that room the day of the promotion. His message was short. Can we talk? We met at a small rooftop restaurant downtown, the kind with dim lighting and slow jazz humming under the conversations. He looked older, not in years, but in the way stress carves itself into your posture. He didn't even wait for drinks before speaking. It's falling apart, he said. Morale is gone. We're understaffed. Half the experienced team left after you. It's like everyone woke up and realized they were just placeholders. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel the need. He went on. We didn't realize how much you held that place together. Not until you left and everything cracked. He paused, then lowered his voice. They want me to take on leadership roles now. They think just promoting someone internally fixes everything. But I'm tired. I don't want to hold up a broken structure. He looked at me, really looked. Do you have room for one more over there? I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a petty smile, just a real one. Yeah, I said. Ido. And that's how it happened. Not with revenge. Not with sabotage. Not with dramatic gestures. But with gravity. People gravitate toward respect. Toward integrity. Toward leaders who don't need to stand on someone else to rise. Over the next year, little by little, more people followed. The ones who believed in hard work. The ones who always stayed late. The ones who cared about the product, the clients, the mission. They joined not because I begged them to, but because they trusted me, and trust is the rarest currency in any business. My team grew. Our firm grew. We didn't take shortcuts. We didn't undercut competitors. We simply did the work, and we did it well. Meanwhile, my old company shrank. Not because I destroyed it, but because it had been balancing on a foundation of ego and assumption, and those cracks were always there. I just wasn't patching them anymore. One evening, months later, I was leaving the office when I saw a group of my team laughing in the parking lot. Relaxed, unhurried, unafraid. The golden hour light hit their faces, warm and soft. The sky streaked in pinks and oranges. Felt like watching something alive, something real. This was what work was supposed to feel like. Not grinding, not begging for recognition, not proving your worth every single day. Just building something with people who believe in it. And in that quiet moment, I understood. I didn't just walk away from a job. I walked into the life I should have had all along. What I have now isn't just success. It's dignity. It's fulfillment. It's freedom. And the revenge? The simple. I became everything they didn't believe I could be, without them. A few months later, I was walking into a client meeting downtown when I ran into him, my old boss. The man who once looked down at me from behind his polished office desk. acting like my entire career depended on his approval. He didn't look as put together as before. His suit was still expensive, yes, but his eyes were tired. The kind of tired that sits behind the bones. He hesitated before speaking, like he wasn't sure whether to smile or pretend he didn't see me. "Hey," he finally said, voice too casual, too forced. "Long time." I nodded. "Yeah, it has been." There was a silence, the kind that weighs on the air. He shifted his briefcase. "Look, if you're not too busy, maybe we could talk sometime? Grab coffee? There are some things happening at the office. I think we could help each other." Help each other. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I just watched him. And in that moment, I realized something important. He wasn't the villain anymore. He wasn't the gatekeeper. He wasn't the person with power over my life. He was just a man facing consequences. I gave him a small, polite smile. Nothing cruel. Nothing triumphant. "I don't think that'll be necessary," I said. "We're on different paths now." His face tightened, not angry, just resigned. The kind of resignation that hits when the world moves on and leaves you standing still. He nodded, slow. Yeah, I guess we are." I walked past him and didn't look back. Not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I didn't need to. I didn't need revenge to feel whole. I didn't need him to lose for me to win. The real victory was that I no longer cared about his approval, his recognition, his opinion of me. He wasn't part of my story anymore. Later that evening, I was sitting at home, lights low, a cup of tea warming my hands, when I thought about everything that happened. The humiliation, the anger, the quiet rebuilding of my life. And I realized, what I had wanted all along wasn't a promotion. It was respect. But respect can't be given by someone who doesn't understand it. It can only be built piece by how you choose to live. My new team believed in me. My clients trusted me. My work spoke for itself. The world that once made me feel small had no hold on me anymore. Because the real revenge was never making them regret losing me. The real revenge was loving the life I built when they let me go. A few weeks after I ran into him, I heard through former colleagues that the company wasn't doing well. Their biggest client, the one I used to manage personally, the one I nurtured like it was its own living, breathing thing, had pulled their contract. Apparently, they didn't like the new management direction, which was a polite way of saying they were tired of his daughter's incompetence. From what I heard, the daughter had missed deadlines, messed up presentations, and shrugged off responsibility like it was optional. One of my old teammates told me she even cried in a meeting and accused the client of putting too much pressure on her. It became a joke across departments. But the punchline was expensive. The company lost millions. Then came layoffs, budget cuts, morale collapse. The whole building started to feel like a sinking ship. And my ex-boss? He was running around trying to plug holes with his bare hands. But you can't save a ship built on ego when its foundation is rotting. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My clients were loyal, not because they were mine, but because I treated them like people, with respect, patience, and consistency. My team laughed during meetings. Ideas bounced freely. Creativity felt natural. Work felt lighter. One evening, my team surprised me with a small celebration. Nothing extravagant, just a rooftop dinner with city lights flickering around us. Music played softly. Someone brought cake. Someone else brought wine. We sat under the open sky telling stories, joking, breathing like life was something meant to be enjoyed. At some point, one of my new junior analysts, bright-eyed, sharp, eager to learn, looked at me and asked, "How did you know when it was time to leave your old job?" I thought about it for a moment. The long nights, the overlooked effort, the feeling of being replaceable in a place where I had given everything. I answered quietly, when staying started to feel like shrinking. Everyone fell silent, the kind of silence where understanding passes between people without explanation. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a speech. It was simply the truth. Later that night, when I drove home, I rolled down the window. The air was warm. Streetlights flickered past. And I realized something I wish I had known sooner. You don't always get to choose how people treat you, but you always get to choose when to walk away. And sometimes, walking away is not losing. Sometimes, it's the first real step toward winning a life that feels like your own. Not revenge, not payback, just freedom. And that is a victory no promotion could ever match. But life has a funny way of circling back. About 6 months after I left, I got an email. Subject line, request for consultation. It was from my old boss. I stared at the screen for a solid minute. Not out of shock, but out of the kind of quiet amusement life gives you when it's finally, undeniably on your side. The email was painfully polite, even formal. He wrote that the company was facing structural challenges and needed strategic guidance to rebuild key client relationships. In other words, they were in trouble and he needed help. He didn't mention his daughter at all. Not one word, which told me everything I needed to know. I didn't reply immediately, not because I was angry, that part of me was gone, but because I didn't owe him urgency. 2 days later, I responded, "Thank you for reaching out. I am available for corporate consultation. My current advisory rate begins at $450 per hour. Let me know if you'd like to schedule time." No apologies, no explanations, no emotion, just business. A week later, we met in a conference room at a neutral co-working space. He looked older, not in the way time ages someone, but in the way stress rewrites them. His posture, always rigid with ego, had softened. His voice wasn't confident. It wavered at the edges. He told me everything that had gone wrong. Client losses, employee turnover, internal conflict, reputation damage. Meanwhile, his daughter had taken a leave of absence, which we both understood meant she had collapsed under a role she was never equipped for. When he finished talking, he looked at me with eyes that finally, maybe for the first time, understood what I had been worth. "I should have given you that promotion," he said. He didn't say it dramatically. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He simply said it like someone who had finally run out of ways to lie to himself. And you know the surprising thing? I wasn't happy to hear it. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no dramatic surge of victory music swelling in my chest. I just felt calm, because by then, I didn't need his validation. I had already built something better. So I shook his hand, not to forgive him, not to vindicate him, but because I no longer carried the weight of what he did. I gave him advice, clear, professional, detached. I got paid for my time, well paid. And when I left that building, I knew I was closing the last door that had ever held power over me. Not slamming it, just quietly locking it behind me because I didn't live there anymore. Walking back to my car, I caught my reflection in the window. Not smaller, not overlooked, not waiting to be chosen, but grounded, confident, self-defined. And I realized something that almost made me laugh. The real revenge wasn't leaving. The real revenge was that leaving let me become someone they could never replace. Not because they didn't want to, but because now, they couldn't. A month later, I got a message from one of my former coworkers, someone who had always treated me with respect, even when others didn't. She asked if I could meet her for coffee. When I arrived, she looked exhausted, like she'd aged 10 years in 6 months. She told me everything. Morale was gone. The culture I had built, the trust, the process, the cohesion had collapsed the minute I walked out. People were scared to speak up. The daughter who had taken my role couldn't handle the pressure, so she had resorted to managing with fear, favoritism, and panic. Good employees left, the remaining ones stayed only because they were stuck. "It was like you were the spine," she said. "When you left, everything else fell limp." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just listened, because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me knowing I was exactly who I thought I was. She leaned closer. "He never respected you because he assumed loyalty was the same as weakness. But when you left, we finally saw that loyalty had been holding the whole thing together." I looked out the cafe window, watching people rush past with grocery bags and coffees, entire worlds of their own unfolding. Funny how life keeps moving, whether your heart is breaking or rebuilding. She asked if I would ever come back to the company, even for a leadership position. I didn't even have to think. "No," I said, because I didn't leave to escape. I left to grow. And I had grown. I had clients now who valued my time, a schedule I controlled, a standard I no longer apologized for. My worth was no longer something I waited for someone else to recognize. It was something I carried into every room. As I stood to leave, she reached for my hand and squeezed it, like she needed grounding. "Thank you," she said softly, "for showing me we don't have to stay somewhere we're not respected." That hit me, because I used to believe strength was staying. Now I know strength is sometimes walking away and not looking back. When I walked outside, the air felt lighter. Not because my world had changed, but because I had. I didn't get revenge through humiliation, anger, or dramatic payback. No, my revenge was quieter, deeper, lasting. My revenge was becoming everything they lost when they chose pride over value. My success wasn't a weapon. It was proof. Proof that I was never small, never replaceable, never invisible. They just never knew how to see me. But now, they do. Everyone does. And the best part? I didn't have to force it. I just had to finally choose myself. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a business leadership conference. Me, the guy whose work was once dismissed as just doing my job. I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of people, talking about something my old boss never understood. A leader isn't the one who takes credit. A leader is the one who others choose to follow. I shared the story of how I built a team, how I listened, trained, supported, and invested in people. I didn't mention the company name. I didn't mention the boss or the daughter. I didn't need to. The lesson stood on its own. After the event, business owners lined up to talk to me, to ask for my guidance, to ask how to create what I had created before. One of them offered me a consulting contract on the spot, more than my previous yearly salary. As I left the venue, I heard my name called across the lobby. I already knew the voice. I turned, and there he was, my old boss. He looked smaller, tired, his arrogance replaced by something unfamiliar. He shook my hand slowly, like his pride had to crack open just to lift his arm. "I didn't realize what you were to the company," he said, voice quiet. For a moment, I saw the man he could have been, if he hadn't chosen ego over understanding. I didn't smile. I didn't insult him. I didn't try to make him feel worse. I simply said, "You never saw it because you weren't looking, but I'm glad you finally do." He nodded, swallowed hard, and walked away. That was the moment I realized. Revenge isn't making someone feel small. Revenge is living in a way they can't help but notice. I walked out of that building into sunlight. No bitterness, no burden, just peace. Because everything I had lost, recognition, respect, opportunity, I had rebuilt for myself. Stronger, cleaner. Mine. Not given, not approved, not granted, earned. And that is a victory no one can take away. Time passed. Not in some dramatic movie montage way, but in the slow, steady way life moves when you're building something real. My new business grew not because I chased success, but because I protected integrity, mine, and the people who worked beside me. The team I mentored began stepping into their own power. I watched one of my junior analysts, the one with the notebook always full of ideas, lead her first major client presentation. She spoke with confidence, calm, and clarity. The client signed a 2-year contract before she even finished the follow-up email. When she walked back into the office, the applause was genuine. Not forced, not performative, not political. She hugged me afterward and whispered, "No one ever believed in me like this before." And I realized something important. The real legacy we leave is the courage we create in others. One evening, while reviewing quarterly growth reports, I got a message from one of my old coworkers, someone who stayed behind at the old company. He said, "You were right to leave. They're shutting down 2 departments. The daughter quit. Your old boss is stepping down." I stared at the message for a while, not with satisfaction, not with anger, with understanding. Empires built on entitlement eventually fall under their own weight. You don't have to push. Gravity does the work. But life wasn't about watching someone else lose anymore. That chapter was finished. A year later, something happened I didn't expect. I received an invitation in the mail, the formal kind, embossed paper, gold trim. It was for an award ceremony. My company, the one we built from quiet resilience and honest work, was being recognized for workplace culture excellence. There were trophies, speeches, cameras, and shaking hands, but the real moment happened afterward. I found myself standing on a balcony overlooking the city, a view that, once upon a time, I had only dreamed of as I left late-night shifts from a building where my work was invisible. The city lights flickered like 1,000 open doors. I remembered the nights I walked home feeling small, the mornings I swallowed frustration because hard work would eventually be noticed, the days I convinced myself patience was loyalty when really it was fear of letting go. Now, I was free, and I wasn't free because someone else finally treated me right. I was free because I finally treated myself right. Leaving was never the loss. Losing yourself would have been. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to remember who I was before someone tried to make me feel replaceable. Turns out I was the foundation the whole time. And once you know your worth, really know it, no title, boss, promotion, or absence of recognition can ever take it away again. So here's the truth no one tells you. You don't rise by waiting to be seen. You rise by choosing not to disappear. And the moment you make that choice, the world adjusts around you.